What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? How are we doing? Hopefully everyone is doing well. And I would imagine, at least if you are a Steeler fan, you can breathe a sigh of relief. Aaron Rodgers will be your quarterback, and he will be in attendance next week at mandatory minicamp. So the long-awaited drama, I think we all knew this was going to take place for a long, long time. But now we have, I would say, official word that Aaron Rodgers will be the Pittsburgh Steelers starting quarterback for 2025. If I was a guessing or betting man, I would say this would probably be his last season playing football in the NFL. But we'll discuss that from a couple different angles, as well as some other stuff going on around the NFL. Anthony Richardson, his shoulder, which he had surgery on several years ago, doesn't seem to be cooperating, and he's not able to practice right now, so not ideal. Then a couple other news and notes from around the league. If you missed it, yesterday we had on John Spytek, the new Raiders GM, and we discussed being a first-time GM, running a draft, drafting Ashton Genty, working hand in hand with Tom Brady, where he used to work as the number 2 under Jason Light, working with Baker Mayfield. It was awesome. So if you missed that, you can check it out on YouTube. You can check it out on our podcast feed. Appreciate everyone that watched and enjoyed it. John, much appreciation toward him. I mean, he was awesome. Gave me a lot of time, and it was great. So really, really enjoyed that. But before we dive into some football, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners in the official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time. Best ticketing app in America, and I've used them all. Because what do you want to do? Do you want to go to a game this summer? Do you want to go to a baseball game? Enjoy some sun, have a brewski, have a hot dog. Maybe take a loved one, take your child, take your father. I don't know. Go enjoy yourself. A concert. Do you want to get out and about, have a good time, get out of the house, and kind of let your hair down and have a good time? Well, do it on us, because Game Time, any concert, any comedy show, any game, college or pro, easiest app to use, to scroll, to find out where you want to go. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. The Pittsburgh Steelers. Turns out, which I think we all knew, we're not planning on going into the season with Mason Rudolph. Their game plan, as they've essentially been telling us now for a while, was we're pretty confident in Aaron Rodgers. And I think this goes back to when Aaron flew out to Pittsburgh and he snuck in that Malibu, that there was a handshake deal. Welcome to business. Because the moment the Giants, looking back, signed Russell Wilson, they realized they were out. And I'm pretty sure we'll never know the exact conversation. Maybe Aaron and Tomlin over the course of the next week will maybe divulge some of those details. But I think everyone knew at that moment where we were headed. We just didn't know the date. And now we officially know that Aaron Rodgers will be the quarterback for the Steelers. I do think Pittsburgh's in a tough spot. And listen, it's not easy to replace a legend. And that's what Roethlisberger is. He's probably one of the more talented players in the history of the organization. And it's an organization with, I'd say, some of the more storied group of individuals in the history of the sport. They've been winning well before I was alive, and I was born in 1984. All they do is win. Now, over the course of basically the last decade, while they make the playoffs and have winning records, they have no shot to win a Super Bowl. And I think there's a big and a fine line between we're winning 9-10 games, but we are getting curb stomped in the first round. And as we've seen the last couple years, there is a distant gap, not between them and the Chiefs, the team that owns the AFC, but that next tier of team that can't even beat the Chiefs. And that would be the Bills and the Ravens, who are in a different stratosphere currently than the Steelers. And I'm going to relate this to, like a lot of young guys, I started losing my hair in my early 20s. I remember being in college and looking down at my desk, because I surely wasn't listening to the professor, and seeing hairs all over it. And knowing my dad was bald, my brother's bald, my grandparents are bald, and most of my cousins on the male side are obviously bald. So I knew it was inevitable. Yet when you're young and you think you can fix the problem, and whether it was Rogaine over the counter or Propecia, a prescription drug, you thought you could hold on. And there is no band-aid when you're losing your hair. Maybe if you have some money, you can get hair transplants and go to Turkey. But in terms of the avenues I was going, it had no shot. It was like trying to put a band-aid over a bullet hole. And that to me is what the last couple years have been for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, I understood why they signed Russell Wilson and Justin Fields last year. That was a better option than Kenny Pickett, but neither option was great. Like, if you're hungry and your only two options are Burger King and Arby's, it's like, yeah, you can get some food. Do you actually want to eat that? Used to love the rodeo cheeseburger back in the 90s for Burger King, but that's beside the point. And I think when you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, like, it's kind of like last year. Like, would I rather have 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers or a mid 30s Russell Wilson and a mobile Justin Fields? At the end of the day, I don't think it matters because you're obviously not beating the Chiefs. You're definitely not beating the Ravens. You're definitely not beating the Bills. And if the Bengals can just figure out a way to not start so damn slow, you're not in the same universe as them. Why? They have elite quarterbacks in their prime. And this is why, like, I'm not a believer in, like, one, in the NFL, it's hard to tank. Even Stephen Ross found that out years ago when he begged Brian Flores to tank. Said he would pay him 100 grand a loss. And Flores won three of his last five games, one being to the Bengals, and it cost him Joe Burrow, and they got stuck with Tua. Now, Tua is still a better option than, I don't know, 12 to 15 quarterbacks in the NFL, but relative to Joe Burrow, there's a big gap. And the Steelers just refuse to suck. And maybe it's because Mike Tomlin's floor is so high. Maybe just they always have enough good players. They're never going to bottom out. They're never going to have a season at this current pace like the Giants have had the last couple of years or like the Patriots have had the last couple of years. That's just not on the table. Now, it felt for a split second like, well, if Aaron actually doesn't play and they just roll in with Mason Rudolph, I don't think they'll draft one or two, but I can see him drafting like ninth or 10th, and that would be their avenue out because Google where Roethlisberger got drafted. Pretty sure he wasn't the 27th pick. And they just don't want to do that, which I find respectable. And that's what Aaron Rodgers gives them the option to do: win 9 or 10 games and then get beat in the first round of the playoffs. And they're trying to band aid this situation. But what's going to happen in 2025 when they're drafting 19th? It's going to be the same thing over and over and over again. And like I've said, I thought last year was the opportunity before the 24 season, that offseason, to break up with Mike Tomlin. Not because he's some scrub. Do what the Saints, I mean, in a different manner, did with Sean Payton. Trade him. Just go your separate ways. Especially last season when Ben Johnson was available. It just gave you a chance to have a clean break. Mike Tomlin would have immediately been hired and just kind of start over, but they refuse. So I'm done acting, and I see it come up every once in a while. People are like, it's time is over for Mike Tomlin. Not with the Steelers ownership. That's not going to end anytime soon. And their team, like this year, like what is their formula? They're going to have a top, if they are going to have any chance to even be better than what we think, they're going to have one of the best defenses in the league. And they drafted a defensive tackle really high in the draft. And to me, they're going to have to run the ball at an elite level. And listen, Najee Harris, I've been watching him since high school. Big time recruit, goes to Bama, first round pick. I always thought he was kind of average. And they drafted a guy on the second day of the draft, Caleb Johnson from Iowa, who last season was a monster. He had 1,500 yards and 21 touchdowns. He's 6'1", 225 pounds. He's a beast. They would need, to me, to be like, take a step for him to essentially do what he did in college into the NFL as a rookie. 1,500 yards. I don't know, 12, 13 touchdowns. Now, Arthur Smith's history, obviously Derrick Henry had some of the best years of his career running behind him. He's going to want to run the ball. And can Rodgers be better than whatever we saw Russell Wilson down the stretch? Yeah, maybe. But I don't see it. And listen, if you are going to say, hey, they did it again, they didn't lose. Yeah, I mean, that's okay. Cool. Did they make any more progress toward chasing the teams that they're trying to do? Of course not. And you could argue they're actually going to take a step backwards because it's a short-term plan with no long-term solution in play. And I don't blame Aaron Rodgers. This was clearly his not only best option, you could argue it was his only option to not be a bad team. I mean, if you put him on the Giants, I don't think much changes at all, especially when you factor in that division. And the Vikings um, they weren't giving him a offer, so he couldn't go there. And I think that this ends with Aaron Rodgers. Who knows? I mean, at 41 years old, here's the other thing. I think we got a little spoiled with the Tom Brady situation. He still played really well at 42, at 43. You know, a huge part of Rodgers' game was never playing like Tom. Tom hasn't been able to move for decades. Aaron Rodgers, when he was winning MVPs 4 or 5 years ago, I guess a little less than that, 3 or 4 years ago, his athletic ability still played a huge part. Now, was he the 2011, 2015, kind of that range version of Aaron? No. But I would say a huge part of his arsenal was moving around. You saw last year, every once in a while, he'd be like, oh, he moved decent. But for the most part, it's gone. He ain't running away from a soul. And really, the playmaking ability doesn't exist, especially as the season went on and it got cold. Well, what division does he play in? The AFC North. What's the first thing that comes to mind about the AFC North? Cold weather, smash mouth, tough football. And not that he's not used to playing in that. He played in Green Bay for years, but that ability to ad lib is gone. And the other thing we saw out of Tom that last season, and I don't blame any of these guys, and we saw it a little bit with Rodgers, you know, in 2024 playing for the Jets. In what world, when you're in your 40s, when you have hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, are you going to stay in that pocket that extra second so you can deliver that ball on 3rd and 8 in the fourth quarter with 7 minutes left in a game where you're down 4? And if you don't get this first down, who knows? I mean, it could be the game. And those guys were willing to do that for the most of their career, and that's what made them great players. Once you get in the fourth, like, I'm not getting mollywopped here by this untouched blitzing defender who is going to hit me right in my chest, and I might not be able to breathe when I hit the ground. Well, they kind of let the ball go early, or they just hit the ground, and you become, again, relative to what they were, a shell of themselves. Because what they were, especially in Aaron Rodgers' case, best player, you probably argue, in the history of the Packers, and one of the greatest players of all time. And that's not is he a serviceable player? Is he a functionable player? Of course. He's still really talented. He still throws the ball with a high velocity. And when he has time, he's an accurate passer. But the version of the guy that LaFleur and Gutekunst got to win those MVPs is not the same guy that we saw last year, which is, of course, he's not. He's 41 years old. So, I don't know. I mean, Steelers, man, I feel for Steelers fans because it could be worse. I mean, you could be a shitty organization, but it's like, what are we doing here? Where are we going? And the answer we all know when it comes to the AFC playoffs is nowhere. The NBA Finals are here, and this is your last chance to bet on the NBA until next season. And the DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, is pulling out all the stops to make it a finals to remember. One team will be crowned the champ, and the other will be lost to history. Who you got winning it all? Obviously, everyone's picking the Thunder. Not going to lie, don't hate dabbling a little on the Pacers. 5-1 to win the series. It's the NBA Finals. They just destroy the 1 seed, the Cavs, work the Knicks. I think people are sleeping on the Pacers a little bit. I get the Thunder are good, but I think people are underrating the Pacers. All season long, DraftKings has been the go-to spot for NBA player props, and that doesn't stop now. Who you got carrying their team to the chip? Try placing a bet on your personal MVP to drop 30, 40, or 50. I would expect, obviously, Shea, but definitely Halliburton to have some big games. Ready to place your first bet? Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Lock in your bets and finish the season as a winner. Here's something special for first-timers. New DraftKings customers, bet $5, win $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Don't miss your last chance to bet on the NBA season. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $300 in bonus bets If your bet wins, when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. A couple other things around the NFL. You guys know where I stand on Anthony Richardson and the Daniel Jones situation. One, I wouldn't want either one of these quarterbacks. But I've seen this song and dance before. We just saw it a couple years ago with Trey Lance. Draft a guy high, clearly not working out. The players on the team aren't behind it. You bring in another guy, it's over. Not even when training camp starts. And the coaches and the GMs can say whatever they want. This ended the moment they gave Daniel Jones $14 million. It was his job to lose. Just like in the example I've used with the 49ers, the moment they signed Sam Darnold, Trey Lance wasn't even going to be the second string quarterback anymore with the 49ers. And that's the way it played out. Now, Trey Lance ended up getting traded to the Cowboys. I think it would be more difficult to trade Anthony Richardson given that he's currently injured, but same type deal. And now that he has an injury that dates back to the shoulder injury in 2023, which knocked him out for the season, it's clearly not good. And sometimes you have a shoulder injury at quarterback position. Happened to Cam, and he was never the same. I mean, Cam in his heyday, never the most accurate passer, but was like, I'm trying to think of a closer that throws 103 miles an hour. I mean, just had a bazooka. And then those last couple years with Carolina and then definitely for the Patriots, his arm was a shell of itself. And I'm no doctor, didn't go to medical school, but I know shoulder injuries when it comes to quarterbacks, fatigue and soreness, especially at a young age. It's one thing, it's like, like when Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or Drew Brees or some of these Roethlisberger, some of these guys in their mid to late 30s need a day off or a couple days off or totally understandable. It's another thing to be under 25 years old. You should be fresh as a daisy. You should be able to throw an unlimited amount of footballs. And it's like, yeah, it's hurting. I'm in pain. So listen, totally understand why they swung for the fences. I commend and admire that mindset. I think it's the right mindset to have. And just as like when Aaron Judge hits a walk-off 3-run home run, he's swinging for the fences. Sometimes you don't even make contact and you strike out and you go back to the dugout and put your shit together and you head home. And I think that's what we have to acknowledge. Chris Ballard swung for the fences on this one and he didn't make contact. He whiffed. Derek Carr, I don't pretend to quite know everything that's going on here. Clearly, it got weird with the Saints. I do think Derek has shown over the course of his career he's a high character guy, but I do think it's kind of easy to say. He made some comments essentially saying that part of the reason he retired is he didn't want to get surgery and just collect a bunch of money for the Saints and do nothing. His actions spoke louder than his words. He gave the Saints, I think, $10 million back, which he could have collected if he had just gotten the surgery. But I do think he knew, whether he was healthy or not, that Kellen Moore did not want him, that this new coaching staff wanted no part of him. Now, he's made comments about that his career is really over. We'll see. And it'll be interesting. Like, does he get surgery, or was it one of those where, like, if you're just a normal citizen, it's like, yeah, you could get your MCL feels a little weird. You could get surgery, or you could also just live through it. And most human beings try to avoid surgery at all times. Like, obviously, to play football, you need to get work done. But it's like, yeah, you get surgery right now. You're probably not playing golf for a while. Probably aren't just enjoying your family and hanging out this summer. So maybe he doesn't get surgery. And to me, if you don't get surgery, it probably truly ends his career. And that's what all signs point to right now. The other thing that we had talked about a couple weeks ago, that Kyle Pitts was like holding out because he wanted a new contract. Turns out he was actually injured. But there are a bunch of rumors that teams have called and trying to trade for him. To me, there's enough smoke with this situation. If Pitts is healthy, he is not going to be on the Atlanta Falcons. And I think it's one of those where a team that really liked him in the draft can get him for like a fifth round pick. Now, part of it is because of his contract. It ends after this season, and he's expensive. He almost makes $11 million for a guy catching less than 50 balls. But there is definitely going to be a team that thinks like, listen, we had this guy rated as a top 5, top 10 pick in the draft a couple years ago. We have seen guys like this, Darren Waller's a good example of like when Darren Waller really got it figured out for a couple years with Gruden and the Raiders, he was an elite player. And I think people will look at Kyle Pitts kind of in that mold. Is Kyle Pitts going to block? Of course not. But that's not what we're trading him for. And someone that has the cap space, like, yeah, I'll give a fifth or sixth round pick. Because I think at the end of the day, that's all that Atlanta would end up fetching for him. Welcome to Chasing Challenges, brought to you by Microsoft. In the NFL, just like in the business world, overcoming obstacles is key to success. Microsoft empowers business decision makers with AI solutions, simplified cloud and data management, and trustworthy, responsible technology to turn challenges into opportunities. In this segment, we'll explore some of the biggest challenges being faced in the NFL and how they can be overcome. Whatever challenge you're facing, Microsoft empowers you with the expertise to say, bring it on. This week, we're discussing the challenge faced by. I do think Washington is in an interesting spot. They have this incredible first year with Adam, with Dan Quinn, with Jaden Daniels. It couldn't have gone any better. Jaden has this historic season. It resurrects the franchise. They win a couple playoff games. It's incredible how far they made it, given their roster. And then this season, they load up. They trade for Deebo Samuel. They trade for Laremy Tunsil. It's like, God, there actually could be, it's weird to say about a team that was in the Final Four, but a lot more substance behind it. That their roster should be dramatically better. And then I see a headline that like Terry McLaurin hasn't been there this week or last week and doesn't plan on coming to OTAs. Because why? He wants a contract extension. Don't blame him. He's makes $23 million. He looks at guys like Brandon Ayuk making 29, 30. He looks at Deebo Samuel on his own team who's making more. And there are videos about Laremy Tunsil, who hasn't been around either, kind of going viral about like, don't worry that he's not at OTAs. Look how good a shape he's in. You guys know why the Houston Texans traded Laremy Tunsil? Not because they thought the guy wasn't good. Of course they know that. Their offensive line sucked. He by far was their best player. And they don't just be like, yeah, we'll just trade our left tackle. It's because they knew that he wanted a massive contract extension. So you got Laremy Tunsil and you got Terry McLaurin. And here's the thing. When you pay a linebacker or a safety or a tight end or certain positions, even if they are elite players, right? Like Howie giving Zach Bond some money, or Christian McCaffrey, or Saquon Barkley, or George Kittle. Some of these positions to get these contract extensions, it actually doesn't cost you that much money. When you give a contract extension or a new contract to a guy like Terry McLaurin or a guy like Laremy Tunsil, it is really expensive. Now, part of having this rookie contract with Jaden Daniels is to take advantage of that with other players. But here's the thing. This is Laremy Tunsil's third contract. And he's going to, I'm sure, want well over $100 million guaranteed. Well, what do you think Terry McLaurin's going to cost? Plays wide receiver, who's been your star wide receiver for years. And he looks around what other guys, he understands, okay, maybe I'm not Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, but I'm definitely in the category of like the Ayuks and the Amon-Ra St. Browns and kind of that crew. And I'm a year later. So you factor in just natural inflation of the salary cap. And I think you could be looking at the two guys. I don't know if that's $80 million for McLaurin guaranteed and definitely $100 guaranteed for Tunsil. I mean, you're looking at a lot of money between two players. It's probably why these deals haven't got done quite yet, because they're complicated. But this also shows like how important and how different each individual year is. And coaches and GMs say this all the time. Every year is its own entity. Every year is its own team. Every year is its own story, because what happened last year is completely different than this year. We have a new draft class. We have new players in free agency. We have guys that played a role last year that are now gone. So you just never know. You have contractual situations that come up. You have coaching staff turnover. And I think not that this is a good problem to have. I mean, these are good players, but you are talking large amounts of money, and you always have to think twice before giving that out. McLaurin, I would have no hesitation giving him some big time money. I think the Tunsil thing is, a little complicated. And let's face it, Deebo is in a situation where he's playing for money, because if he has a good season, he will get paid again. If he doesn't, like he kind of probably is on a year by year basis. And so he's a guy in that room who has a lot to prove. And I just think there are some more personalities with expectations and you add players like this, there just becomes more risk. And I'm not jumping off the Commanders bandwagon and think like they're going to fall apart here, but they just got more stuff going on right now, especially when you add that they're not like the little engine that could. They're not the team that no one's paying attention to anymore. They're a team that now when you play, this happened to the Lions a couple years ago. Like when the Commanders are on your schedule, you're going to take that game very fucking seriously. And that hasn't happened for that franchise in decades. So that's it for this week's Chasing Challenges. Remember, Microsoft's AI solutions empower you to take bold steps and make informed decisions, sparking new ideas to help drive your business forward. With Microsoft as your trusted partner, you can navigate your journey with confidence, finding innovative solutions and reaching new possibilities. Visit Microsoft.com/challengers to learn more.